Hello and welcome to Sebastian Plays This. This is the first video of my Explain Veshen series where I explain the setting of my Dungeons & Dragons Twitch campaign, Tales of Ye Olde Interest. To which I could not think of a better way to start the series than explaining the continent of Veshen itself where most of my campaign is set. If you're new to my content, you can find me on Twitch at Sebastian Plays This, where I play games like Sims 3 during most of the week, but set aside Tuesday to stream a D&D campaign with my friends. Now, without further ado, be sure to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the video. The story of Veshen began over 4,000 years ago, with the first 2,000 known as the Heroes' Age. Not much specifically is known about this time period, and putting names to dates is usually impossible, as secondary sources are rare and difficult to confirm their authenticity. Sadly, any evidence from the Heroes' Age that may have remained was destroyed shortly after the humans arrived in Veshen. If myths and rumors are to be believed, gods walked the continent of Veshen alongside the first elves, gnomes, dwarfs, and orcs. It is even rumored that races not found natively in Veshen now were present during this time, such as dragonoid peoples and feathered elf-like beings. Dragons are a very common topic during the Heroes' Age. The Elven Age is named so due to the supremacy of elves during this time, and lasted from the year 2000 until 2990. Elves dominated Veshen, scattering and spreading their influence through many different kingdoms, often exerting their power over other non-elven kingdoms. Even now, other non-human races sometimes view the use of the Elven Age as a time period as an insult, leading many non-elven creatures to have their own names addressing this past millennia. Unlike the Heroes' Age, there is still direct archaeological evidence of this period. Elven ruins survive to present, and the wealthy and well-connected of Veshen are known to collect surviving ancient elven items. Interestingly, gnomes are rarely referenced during the Elven Age, despite how often they are mentioned in past ages legends, and ages since. This has led to a variety of theories, however. Gnomes are notably not bothered by their virtual absence from this period. The Elven Age is considered to have ended shortly after the Heth emergence in 2960. Appropriately named the Arrival Era, this period marks the first accounts of humans landing in Veshen in 2990, and ends with the founding of the first human kingdoms. Dwarven accounts record that humans arrived on the shores of the Dwarven kingdom of Incentium in the summer of 2090. The dwarves are said to have hosted the humans before they would eventually spread to the greater Veshen continent. The elven nations may have been in decline before the humans arrived, but with the influx of humans and their disregard for elven territories, humans quickly began to overrun the elves. To make combating the humans' incursion on elven lands more difficult, the humans' ease at which they increased their populations easily outpaced the elves and most other Veshen races. The first humans to unite into a kingdom would be the United Archon Theocracy in 3110 under the leadership of a supposed god king. This is widely considered to be the final chapter of the Arrival Era. Shortly after the formation of the Archon Theocracy, other kingdoms began to spring up, forcing the already struggling elves on the defensive, and the other non-human races scrambling to protect their weaker territories. This period is plainly referred to as the Warring Era. At the beginning, the elves and other non-human races were moderately successful battling the humans, but one by one, the major kingdoms were brought to ruin by the humans. It was during this time that humans stopped arriving from their distant homeland and notably lost any knowledge of how to return home. To the humans, they were fighting to survive in a strange land seemingly abandoned by their origin, but to the non-humans, this was the beginning of their destruction. The wars raged far into Veshen to what would become Poros. Poros itself was established during this period, with the god king Archon seizing territory from the elf and orc kingdoms to grant to the new human lords. The last major non-human kingdom, apart from the dwarves of Incentium, fell in 3455, officially ending the Warring Era. The Warring Era decimated the non-human kingdoms, ushering in a much weaker resistance in the Expansion Era, which began in 3455 and lasted until 3605. Humans took hold of much of Veshen, with only a small amount of non-human territories remaining. The gnomes, who once held their own kingdom in the south of Veshen, have declined to the point of barely forming functional clans. This is not to say the gnomes have failed in their struggle to survive. Gnomes still inhabit their commonly believed ancestral lands, even if they are still far from holding a kingdom as they did in the past. The Southern Hill Clan Coalition is viewed by many gnomes as a source of pride in Veshen. Meanwhile, Incentium survived mostly untouched by the Warring Era, surviving into the Expansion Era due to their difficult geography, clever diplomacy, and commitment to tradition. That all said, diplomacy did not successfully amount to any lasting alliances between the non-human races of Veshen, allowing the humans to form the kingdoms of Quipmore and the Ivory Kings. The Alliance Age lasted only 5 years, from 3605 to 3690, but holds the strongest resistance to humans since their arrival in Veshen. Gnomes attempted to rebuild their kingdom and aligned with elves, orcs, and even the dwarves, with the great aspiration of ridding Veshen of the invading humans. Many successful assaults on human territory took place during this age, causing all the human kingdoms to finally go onto the defensive. The humans were decimated throughout Veshen, losing cities and retreating enough that some lost non-human kingdoms began to reform their ancestral homes. Surviving accounts even show that certain humans were looking to leave Veshen, either to attempt to return home or settle somewhere far from the united armies of the non-humans. Sadly for the non-humans of Veshen, their success would be short-lived. The elderly Archon single-handedly slayed each of the remaining leaders of the non-human kingdoms. This was a critical blow to morale and caused massive succession crises. After this event, known as the First Cleansing, the Archon is said to have ascended to godhood, and the United Archon Theocracy changed leadership to his chosen descendant. Igorland was formed on the ashes of one of the formerly hopeful minor elven kingdoms, shortly after the First Cleansing. In light of the massive failure of the Alliance Age, the Purge Era began in 3690 and lasted close to 400 years, ending in 4055. This era still casts its dark shadow over modern Veshen, only closing 60 years before present. With the humans on the rebound of the past age, they mobilized quickly to end what they referred to as the non-human menaces of Veshen. They enacted cruel policies of extermination and exile from their fertile lands. The humans aligned together, led by the human supremacist nation of the United Archon Theocracy. With this united front, the humans swept through Veshen with terrifying efficiency, and with the north virtually blocking their enemy from fleeing to the relative safety of the plains of Veshen, the remaining elves and orc kingdoms were destroyed, and gnomes were effectively blocked from ever moving past their lifestyle of bickering clans in the south, with only the dwarven kingdom of Incentium surviving. The non-humans attempted many times to align together, but every attempt at rebellion was quickly stamped down by the humans. As the Purge Era passed, the humans diversified in culture, warring with each other rather than the minorities that may pass through their lands. For the betterment of non-humans, most kingdoms loosened their cruel policies, allowing the original inhabitants of Veshen some mobility in their former lands. The exception of this, of course, being the Archon Theocracy, who are still committed to the founding principles of the Purge Era. And finally, we meet the present Common Era, marked by the fall of Poros. Non-humans are tolerated in most of Veshen, even if they are rarely found outside of lower society around humans. The gnomes have found themselves split between those in the south and those in the north of Veshen. Those that populate the south have survived by abandoning fertile land and continuing to live as loosely aligned clans, somewhat overlapping their supposed former kingdom's territory. They no longer live in cities, but roam the hills and northern edges of Veshen's desert. In the north, gnomes were imported as servants to those in Quipmore. The Quipmorians, more tolerant of non-humans than most, appreciated the seemingly innate tutoring skills of gnomes, allowing their servants a great deal of privilege compared to other non-humans in Veshen. The remaining orcs have organized and risen into a somewhat proper nation at the border of Poros. The centuries of defending themselves from humans to the south and east, along with a complicated relationship with Volheim to the north, has led to the orcs developing a strong martial tradition. The orcs' territory of the Unger are only barely aligned, but with time, perhaps they can unite into something more than a middling power. Elves have lost virtually everything in Veshen. Human kingdoms now taint their ancestral lands, with the only standing pillar of their former greatness being the city of Erishen, in what is mockingly proclaimed the land of the elves. Outside of Erishen, the elves roam the northern plains of Veshen, only hesitantly traveling south. Those with elven blood that can pass as human have found some success in the human lands. Dwarves have survived the centuries by sticking to tradition and virtually never leaving Incentium. Only recently have dwarves began to establish a presence outside of their homeland. How the influx of new ideas affect the dwarves remaining remains to be seen. Thank you for watching the first episode of Explaining Veshen. Yes, I've decided on that name despite the graphic. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you sometime on my Twitch chat or in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.
And then she just shoves her whole entire hand into the bandit. He wakes